Alright everybody, it is Carl's Collects Comics and I am back with another Friday feature, and I can't wait to share with you my picks for the top 10 1980s cartoon comics that you should be picking up right now, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, so I'm back with another Friday feature, and based on the popularity of some of the top 10 lists that I've released, I decided to start putting together more of those. So this Friday feature, I'm focusing on the top 10 80s cartoon comics that you should be buying right now, or that you should be picking up. Most of these you can get a copy, I think almost all of these actually, you can find copies for well under $100. Which to me, I consider that affordable. Some of these you can even get as low as 20, 15, sometimes even 10, maybe even less. I have personally found some of them for a lot less. So here's the list. The first, and then this is in no particular order, but the first on the list is Transformers #1. Obviously, you know, when you talk about 80s comic characters, or 80s cartoon characters and comics based on them, Transformers is going to be at the top. So Transformers #1, it's the first appearance of Optimus Prime, Megatron, and Starscream, among many others. There were 5 different printings. There's a first print, a second print, a third print, a Canadian price variant, and then the newsstand. The only way to tell them apart is the price, the bottom icon, and the indicia on the inside front page. So the reason I put Transformers #1 on the list was because it's an iconic 80s cartoon series. It defines childhood for many adults today, you know, alongside G.I. Joe. It's already been adapted, but, you know, to mixed reviews. Not everybody's a fan of the Michael Bay films, but they've done a soft reboot with Bumblebee, and, you know, we'll see what they do to continue to develop the property and adapt it and bring it to live action or cartoons. I still feel like it's a lower priced key book that's readily available. That, you know, I was scrolling through eBay before shooting this video, and there's a ton of copies in all different grades for all different prices. So really, whatever your budget is, there is a copy that you can buy. And unlike G.I. Joe, which had seen a spike in preparation for the Snake Eyes movie, Transformers #1 has cooled off a lot, and so it's a great key book to be picking up right now. So that's #1 on my list. #2 on my list, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends #1, and yep, that's right. It is the first appearance of Firestar in comics. So she's a lesser followed mutant character that a lot of people overlook, so right now might be the time to get a copy. It's a unique appearance because, like Morph, Harley Quinn, or Batman Beyond, it was originally based on a character created for an animated series, but it crossed over into main comic book continuity. She's not a very popular character right now, but she's never been adapted for film, so I felt like it was well worth snagging an inexpensive copy right now. Freebie, X-Men Adventures #1, which is the first appearance of Morph from the 90s X-Men cartoon, also a great spec book to pick up. Now, I don't think the chances of Morph ever making it to live action are 1/20th the chance of Firestar ever making it. But with second, third, fourth tier characters like Dazzler, Jubilee, and Bishop's first appearances all skyrocketing, a lot of people are looking for who are the mutant characters that haven't been, that nobody's noticed yet. And Firestar is one of those. And the reason I include her, you know, because 80s cartoons included that series, that odd team up of Spider-Man with Iceman and Firestar. Now, it was a great cartoon, but one of the neat things about it, was Firestar, who is a mutant, made her debut in that, and then she had a limited series, and this is another book you can definitely find a copy for under $50 on eBay if you go on right now. And again, they've got grades all the way across the price range, so no matter what your budget is, you can absolutely find a copy of this book for an affordable price that fits your budget to add it to your collection. #3 on my list, The Real Ghostbusters #1. This was the first appearance of the Ghostbusters in U.S. comics, not in comics in general. There is a UK version that came out prior to this one, but I always like to focus on the United States comics because of the United States market. That's where we are, or most of us, that's where we are. So I picked it because it's an iconic cartoon series based on an iconic movie franchise. It's well worth picking up for the price, as the franchise is relaunched with the new film that's coming. Now this, they had tried with the all-female squad, and I'm not going to get into all that because I know that had mixed reviews, but way more than that one, this current Ghostbusters Afterlife film that's coming up is very much looking like it could be one that it checks all the boxes. Strong casting with relevant stars, a strong story, reappearances of the main characters, plus the introduction of new characters, and then you throw Paul Rudd into anything, and it's automatically going to be entertaining. So I'm really looking forward to that film, but I'm also saying that this Real Ghostbusters #1 I think is well worth a pickup. Again, found copies on eBay, readily available, 20 up to like 250 and more. It just depends on the grade that you want, and it depends on whether you want slabbed or raw. Again, personally, I always go for raw because and I always, quick tip, I like to pick them up in person. Because you can then see and hear all the and really do all the defects. If you're going to buy on eBay, make sure and send messages to the seller and ask questions like, does it look to have any water damage? Is there any restoration to it that you're aware of? How do the staples look? Are they tight? Are they rust free? And then most of all, if they don't say near mint plus or near mint, ask what are the major defects of this book. And sometimes you get extra information that's not in the listing. So moving on, number 4 on my list of top 10 80s cartoon characters that you should be buying right now is Voltron #1. It's the first appearance of Voltron again in U.S. comics. It's, again, reasons I picked it. It's an iconic series that's never been adapted for the big screen. It's well worth adding to the collection because we're at the point now where big stories like a live-action Voltron could be adapted. Now we saw the new Netflix series, the animated series that's come out, and that's been going and seems to be, it seems to have done well. I thought it was all right, but I think a property like that would be ripe for adapting into live action should they decide to move forward with it at some point. And in the same vein as Masters of the Universe and Thundercats, the technology is there now. We can show these giant machines in live action. So that's that is Voltron #1. Then number 5 on my list is some of you are gonna laugh at this one, but I'm a firm believer in it because again, the technology. Dino Riders #1. It's the first appearance of the Dino Riders in comics. Now, I will make sure and mention that like other 80s toy lines that had an accompanying cartoon series, there are the miniature versions of comic books that were included in the toys, and I'm going to picture that right here, right now. But then also, and I'm going to show you this, there is the full, like the comic-sized Dino Riders #1 that was released that had a fuller story and fuller art. It wasn't just something like almost like a little pamphlet that was included with the toys. Because most of these are very affordable at this point, I recommend, like what I'm doing with one of my picks for later on in this same video, is I'm picking up both. If there's any kind of question in my mind, I'm going ahead and I'm picking up the ones that were included in the toys because you can find most of those on eBay for relatively inexpensive. I'm picking those up, but I'm also picking up the full-size comics, and that's what I recommend doing with Dino Riders. I thought this was an interesting concept that could see an adaptation. As comics are, as dinosaurs are coming back into the cultural zeitgeist after the next round of Jurassic World movies, and then with the Jurassic World cartoon series on Netflix. I think that we could see something happen with Dino Riders. It's maybe it's like a 1 in 100 shot, but there's also the nostalgia. If you're like me, if you're the same age that grew up with those cartoons, might be a fun one to pick up. And I think not every spec has to be like hard. Is this going to make me money? Sometimes it can just be, hey, I'm going to pick this piece of nostalgia up, and then it's neat if they end up adapting it and doing something with it. But I think it'd make a great, of course not cheesy like the cartoon series was, but I think it would make a great live action series. But I might be one of like 4 people on the planet who thinks that. So we'll see. Next up on my list of top 10 80s cartoon comics that you should be picking up right now, Silverhawks #1. This is the first appearance of the Silverhawks in comic books. In July of 2021, a revival series was announced, but no further details have been shared. This is another original, unique concept from the 80s that it could have legs in the future, and I think with every studio and every streaming service looking for their own original content that they can develop, and with them exploring every nook and cranny of nostalgia, many of these 80s comic characters or 80s cartoon comic characters are actually really doable when you think about it. Like if you step back and think about it, you attach the right creator to the right property. If the creator has the nostalgia love for it, and you can see the next Kevin Smith's lined up with Masters of the Universe, and bam, you have a streaming series, and all of a sudden everybody's eyes are on that property. Well, Silverhawks #1 is one of those properties, and we've heard something about it. We just don't know any details. I found quite a few copies of these relatively inexpensive on eBay. I think up to $250 was the highest price one I saw. Of course, there's like the super high grade graded copies that are out there, but it's readily available. It's a cool book to have. I know I picked my copy up for $2 at like a antique store, and they had a comic section, and this was a few years ago, so nobody was really digging hard for all these different spec books, and it was easy at 9.6. So I sent it off to get pressed and graded because it's probably going to come back at 9.8. We'll see. Fingers crossed. We'll see. But yeah, I do recommend picking it up. They are out there. There's quite a few of them, and it's just another one of those classic childhood favorites that a lot of people have warm and fuzzies for. And nostalgia is a huge part of comic collecting. Okay, next up, this is one that I think a lot of people are just overlooking it because there's so many other Star Wars characters and so many other just properties and series that have been announced, and everybody's just flying in different directions. Star Wars Droids #1. This was the comic adaptation of the cartoon series from the mid-80s. It's an iconic, often forgotten series. Star Wars connected, and we already know that there's a new Droids property in development. It's going to be animated. And so for the price, it's well worth picking up. I think I saw copies for as low as like $10-15 on eBay. I saw listings for like $30 and $35 for the full the first 4 issues. I think it was a limited series for just 4 of them. And so it's not the black cover one that I've seen around a lot, but this one it is definitely worth picking up because it's the first. If you're a Star Wars person and if you're really trying to get your Star Wars keys together, this would be a great one to pick up and add to the collection. Next up, Blip Magazine #1 is the first appearance of Super Mario and Donkey Kong in a comic story. This one's kind of like my Darkwing Duck in the Disney Adventures smaller digest size magazine. It's not a full comic book, and so these are going to get overlooked a lot of times, but I think that's a reason to go ahead and pick it up inexpensively. Now, this one, I didn't find a copy for under $100. But I think that, these are the biggest video game stars of the 80's featured in a comic. It's relatively low priced for its cultural importance. Keep in mind, video game collectors, comic collectors, there's a lot of overlap, and then just in the cultural zeitgeist, Donkey Kong and Super Mario, they're pretty popular and they're pretty well known. People know those two characters. And so this might be something, might not, but it made my list because of its cultural importance. Next up, Legend of Zelda #1. This comic book series was inspired by the Nintendo video game. Now, I was never really like a fan of Zelda. Like, we had a couple of the games growing up and we played them on the original NES, but I didn't realize how big a fan base Legend of Zelda and Link have. So this book is actually one of the higher priced ones. I was seeing copies for, I think the cheapest copy I found was like $300. So it may be more difficult to get, well, for a high graded one, but you can find, you can always find books like this if you look around. It's a massively popular video game. It's ripe for development due to advances in filmmaking and CGI technology. It's got a huge story world for both feature and series franchising, and then it's got additional power from nostalgia and childhood dollars. The creators of Zelda had long held off on wanting to see it adapted because they were concerned that it could never be brought to its fullest potential on screen. But technology has made huge advances, especially in filmmaking. So a massive film based on one of the most popular video game franchises of all time, it's overdue as far as I'm concerned. And I think that we really could see one happening within the next 5 to 10 years. I know there's been talk of it and rumblings, but once they narrow down and really lock in what it is and what it could be, I could see it being a very, very big hit, and this book making incredible gains over what it is now. So the last on my list, number 10 on my top 10 1980s cartoon comic books to pick up is the Mask preview, the #1 limited, and the ongoing #1. Now, the reason I decided to add all three of these was the same thing I said earlier with regards to the Dino Riders books, and that is because there's multiple firsts for Mask when it comes to comic books. There was a 3-part, 3-issue mini comic book included in some of the original toys. You can find those readily available on eBay for about $30 to $40 for the set of 3. You can also find them individually if you happen to already have them. I think those are well worth picking up. There's also the Mask preview, which was a newsprint preview that was included in some other comic books. Now, it was different comic books. The one that I picked up was, I think it was Superman number 311, and it had Julius Schwartz on the cover, who's one of the editors for the Superman book, but inside that book it had the Mask preview, which was on newsprint that could be pulled out of the comic. Now, I didn't pull it out, I left it in there because I didn't want to, not that I cared about the Superman book, but I just didn't want to take any chance at messing up the Mask preview, and I also didn't know about it. I didn't want to mess with the staples or any of that stuff. So there's that one, and then there's the #1 limited series, which was a full-size comic book, and that one is easy. It's pretty easy to find. I found my copies for at an antique store for like $2 a piece, and I grabbed a couple of them. I just grabbed all the Mask books that were there. There's also the #1 ongoing, which is the first issue for an ongoing series. It didn't last too long, but that's another one that I found my copies for $2 a piece. And a lot of these 80s books over the past few years, they would just be in long boxes in either local comic shops or antique stores or places where people had bunches of boxes of books, and you'd come across one or two of them in there, and you could pick them up for $1, $2, maybe even $3. And to me, it was always well worth it. Anytime I come across 80s comic character or 80s cartoon comics for $2 to $3, I generally always pick them up as long as they're not water damaged, because you never know. And nostalgia, I like to relive it. I enjoy it, and that's really what comic collecting is collecting what you enjoy. And that's why a couple of these made it on here, but there's also some solid, safe bets for the future. So thanks for tuning in for this Friday feature, and I hope that this list of my top 10 picks for 80s cartoon comics that you should be buying right now is helpful. I hope that it brought a little bit of information for you, that it gave a little bit of insight, and it's going to help you as you continue to build your collection. So please consider liking the video, dropping a comment below, telling me what you thought of the list. I love it when people give me their feedback, even if they don't agree with me. Totally cool with that. And it's collecting, so it's a big wide world, and there's enough room for everybody. Also, make sure to consider subscribing. I've got a lot more content that I'm continuing to produce and put out there, and I can't wait to show you some of the stuff that I've got coming up. So this has been Carlos Collects Comics with another edition of the Friday feature. Take care and have a good time with your collection. Talk to you later.